Hello everyone, my name is Babak and I will talk about hydrogen fuel production. And as you know, hydrogen has a high heating value. It's about like 120 to 142 megajoules per kilogram, and it can be produced, stored, and used later, for example, in fuel cells. And for the electrolytic method, basically water is split into hydrogen and oxygen by electric or thermal energy, and we have the water electrolysis, for example, and there's also like a thermolysis, which is like steam electrolysis. We have photolytic process where the water is split by photolysis of certain species like algae, where the light is captured by the chlorophyll or other pigments and it leads to energized electrons, which will reduce the hydrogen plus ions into hydrogen. Then we have a thermochemical hydrogen processing, which uses like hydrocarbons or other things and heat and catalysts to start chemical reactions for production of hydrogen. And for example, in steam reforming, hydrocarbon fuel and steam, they're converted into hydrogen and carbon monoxide. But then again, the carbon monoxide reacts with water in the process, as you know, called water gas shift reaction to produce hydrogen and CO2. Then we have like the partial oxidation method, where you actually use insufficient pure oxygen to produce hydrogen and carbon monoxide only as a product. Well, this process is usually difficult, so there's another similar process, which is like autothermal method, where the steam reforming is combined with the partial oxidation method, and the energy for the endothermic steam reforming somehow or partly compensates by the relatively exothermic partial oxidation. And we have the biomass gasification or pyrolysis, where in a high temperature situation with the controlled oxygen, in order to have just minimum combustion for heat purposes, they produce carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and CO2. And carbon monoxide reacts with water because of the water gas shift reaction to produce CO2 and hydrogen. And all of the methods that involve hydrocarbon fuels and have CO2 as a byproduct. The CO2, because of environmental reasons, they have to be captured and either converted into a valuable product or transported to other places. For example, they can, other than converting the CO2 to valuable product, they can transport it to other locations, and for example, they can inject the extra CO2 to unused field or other places. The point is that CO2 should not be emitted into the atmosphere. Now, there are still other methods of hydrogen production. We have the plasma reforming method, where the electric field is used and plus steam as supporting gas in order to create a plasma state where you have high energy electrons and high energy reactive hydrogen and hydroxide and oxygen ions, which would improve the chemical reaction rate for various hydrocarbon reforming processes. And also, hydrogen can be produced by biological processes. And there are many other methods for making hydrogen. For example, you can hydrogen sulfide. You can decompose that, and there's a lot of biomass decomposition process that ends up with hydrogen as the final, as one of the final products. And lastly, I wanted to say that a catalyst and also nanotechnology, nanostructures, they play a really important role in improving the efficiency of the hydrogen production in many processes like water splitting, in hydrocarbon decarbonization, and hydrogen sulfide decomposition, and in biomass decomposition. And for example, quantum dots which are attached to, let's say, carbon nitride layers assist in isolating hydrogen from oxygen in catalytic water splitting method to produce hydrogen. So again, there are many methods for producing hydrogen, and it all depends on what's available in the energy processing center, and what tools are available to produce that hydrogen in terms of available sustainable and hydrocarbon supplies. And so there are different options that can be used in order to produce hydrogen. And also hydrogen as a fuel has a lot of good features, because you can produce it by other means, and since you're using catalyst and very controlled catalysts and nanostructures, there are many efficient way of making hydrogen, and it's basically at one stage you produce it, and it's like a potential energy, and you store it, and you can use it later, for example, fuel cells. And also hydrogen is used for many other things. For example, in some forms of CO2 conversion, and in many other places you can use hydrogen. But hydrogen fuel is a really good deal, because by itself is a sustainable source of energy, as long as the CO2 that's used in the production process of hydrogen, if there's any CO2 that may be produced while in the hydrogen production facility, if you can take care of that CO2, if you use hydrocarbon fuels, for example, if you take for example, the steam reforming approach, then as long as we take care of the CO2, then we can say that CO2 emission, we can say that the hydrogen fuel is a environmentally free hydrogen fuel is a green technology. And when we use hydrogen fuel by itself, there are no emissions. So by itself, we don't have to worry about any CO2 emissions or other sorts of emissions, and it's really great because use the hydrogen, for example, a fuel cell use the hydrogen and oxygen as the input, and the output is water and energy. But it's just neat. So So again, when you use hydrogen as a source of energy, it's a green energy, and in the production process, we have to make sure that if we use hydrocarbon fuels to produce hydrogen, that we take care of the emissions, which is not difficult. Basically, all we got to do is kind of convert the emissions into valuable product like CO2 emissions if you have it, or transport them to other facilities where you can do further process with the emissions. The emissions they don't have. We have to make sure that they're not emitted into the atmosphere. And so, well, thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.